Welcome back everyone, I'm Forge and today we're going to be talking about shipbuilding. All basic ships are generally made up of 6 things: ship frame and decking, an atlas core to allow the ship to float, a helm to control the ship, a propulsion source to allow the ship to move, respawner to respawn on the ship, and storage to store loot on the ship. You will also at some point want to add wings and possibly guns to your ship, but in the first T1 zone that you spawn in, your ship is not going to require these until you adventure out past the first wind wall. Next, we need to actually build a shipyard, and one of the first problems is when to build a shipyard. A lot of times newbies make the mistake of building a shipyard and they don't yet have all the materials to actually complete their ship, or at least enough materials to build a ship to get off the island in case there's trouble. So I would recommend that what you do is you wait until you have at least enough materials to build a basic ship with core, helm, respawner. That way you could at least lift it up if there's trouble. When you build your shipyard, I would suggest using a material that you don't plan to spend on the ship itself. So in this case, I'm going to use lead because it's relatively useless. Go ahead and right click and equip it, and then hit the hotbar to select it. And you can rotate the decking to walk up on it by hitting the Z. You can notice you can rotate that around. One of the things is you don't want to put it too close to the edge of an island, and you want to put it in a relatively flat area because you want to be able to walk around it. And later when we build parts, we don't want those parts to potentially slide down the slope because of the physics and slide off the island and lose them. Next, interact with the shipyard by walking up to it and hitting E, and then click the show button in the top left corner, and that will show you the shipyard code. So this code is important if you want to have your friends be able to interact with your shipyard that you've created and place parts and help you actually build the ship. You would then tell them what that 4-digit code is. They would walk up, hit E to interact, place the 4-digit code in, hit enter, and then that would give them access to your shipyard. Next is ship schematics. On the bottom left, you have 5 ship schematics that start with the dinghy. You can use those 5 presets as they are already pre-built ships, or you can click them and edit them and change them to build your own ship. You can also rename that ship design to your own name if you wish. It's also important to note that if you select your ship design in the shipyard, you can then hit escape and walk away from the shipyard and look up and see the actual size, shape, and design of that to help aid you build it. Next, what we'll do is we'll click edit on the dinghy, and it'll take us into the ship view mode. And one of the first important things is to notice that in the ship view there of designing the ship, we have a forward word and the arrow, and that shows us which direction of the ship is forward. So when we're designing our ship, the ship by default will travel with the engines in that direction. A lot of times newbies build them backwards. We can then use the mouse and move it left and right and up and down, and that will rotate in the view there. And we can spin the ship around and get the view that we'd like to edit. And we can also use the mouse and wheel to scroll in and out, to zoom in and out to get closer to parts of the frame as well. Next, we use the person icon on the top right. Then we move the mouse over the decking, and this will show you the approximate size of a Worlds Adrift character on that decking, so you can get a good idea of the size of your ship. Oftentimes new players will make ships and they'll spend thousands of resources because the ship will be far too large and they won't have any sense of scale. So since BOSA has added that in, I definitely suggest using this tool when designing your ship to adjust the size correctly. Next, we're going to talk about sections of a ship, and we can see these red and yellow boxes in the design view here. The red boxes go lengthwise and the yellow boxes go vertical. So we can click on the red box and we can drag it back to make the frame longer, or we can click the yellow box and drag it up to make the ship frame taller. And the maximum sizes are 6 long and 4 tall currently in the ship editor. Next, we're going to go ahead and edit a ship frame point. We're going to click on the green circle and it's going to turn yellow, and we're going to see 4 different colors of bars on the screen. We have a green bar which moves the frame up and down. a blue bar which moves that frame point forward or back, a red bar which moves the frame point in or out on the sides, and then two pink bars which moves the frame point midsections in and out on the sides. This helps shape your ship. You can either make it round or straight, and then plating actually sits on this point, so it's very important to edit those correctly if you're having trouble with putting plating on your ship. For now, I'm just going to remove these edits, and we're just going to go with the standard dinghy in this tutorial. Click Done when you're finished editing the ship at the bottom. Next, click Save Ship Frame if you want to go ahead and save the changes that you've made. You can also click Revert Ship Frame if you want to revert the changes back to the last save point of the schematic if you dislike the current edits or changes and wish to start over. The ship editor will not allow you to place materials in it if you have not saved the ship frame. This is often a problem that new players make, is that they'll click between two blueprints after they've saved the previous one they want to edit, and they've looked at something else, and then they go to try to drag the materials in, and they can't figure out why that they can't drag those materials in to build their ship, even though they haven't edited it since the last time they saved it. But technically they do edit it if you click off and back on, so you have to go into the dinghy. You have to then exit back out and click Save to make sure that the material boxes light up before you place materials in them. You can see the beam cost and the decking cost. You'll note that the decking can actually be metal or wood, whereas the beams can only be metal. And when you enter materials into the slots here, at the bottom you can see that the weight of the ship will actually change and show you what the total weight of the ship will be with the beams and decking with the certain materials that you enter. Build in the ship frame begins to build. Next, when you build your ship, the shipyard bubble expands out. This is a protective barrier that will stop cannon fire and gunfire from entering that bubble layer. You can still shoot cannons inside the bubble. It's just that somebody has to bring the tip of their cannons and park their ship on the inside of that bubble. The same as if a player comes inside the bubble, they can still shoot you. They just can't shoot from the outside in or inside out with both cannon and gunfire, so it's important to know that. Next, we need to go ahead and build a assembly station, and the assembly station is used to actually build all the various ship parts that we attach to the frame. There's also some discussion about where to place the actual assembly station, and you don't want to place it too close to the ship or the shipyard I should say, because what will happen is if you're building a gigantic wing, if your ship clips over top of the shipyard where that wing would be built, you cannot build it, as I will show and demonstrate later in this video. So generally I like to place the assembly station about 3/4 the distance away in the bubble near the outside, and you also don't want to place the assembly station on any hill because it's a physics-based game. You could build in an engine and it'll fall off the assembly station and just slide right off the island, and it'll waste all your materials. So again, you want to build that on a relatively flat surface as well. The first item that you want to build is your respawner. You want to build and place the respawner on the ship first, then bind to it. This prevents you from dying and having to run all the way back to the shipyard area. Additionally, if you're in a fight, this allows a 10-second respawn versus a 30+ second respawn to the island respawners, depending on if you've died recently. Click 3 on the keyboard to select the shipbuilding tool. You can then click the respawner and then place it on top of the ship. While looking at the respawner, hold down E to go ahead and bind to the respawner now. It doesn't really matter if you build the Atlas core or the helm second, but either way, these next two items need to be the second and third things built. So in my case, I'm going to build the Atlas core first and then the ship helm. Remember, it takes an Atlas shard to make the actual Atlas core. You can get an Atlas shard when mining ore nodes. Place the Atlas core on part of the ship decking. Remember, you can use Z to rotate the Atlas core around. Because you can use the Atlas pulse mechanic, it's generally a good idea to be able to get to the core easily. We'll discuss this more in the advanced and meta ship building, but for now let's overhang it on the back side to make sure that we can actually hold E and interact with it and use the Atlas pulse. For the third item, I'm going to go ahead and build the helm now and place this on the decking. Now that you have the four basic things, ship, respawner, core, and helm, you can now raise and lower the ship. This might be useful if you're getting attacked while building the ship by players who don't yet have a ship on the island. You can hit spacebar to raise the ship up, and you can hit control to lower the ship down. It's also important to note that each time a ship leaves or docks back on a shipyard, a new shipyard code is generated. If your friends don't have respawners on the ship, you will need to give them the shipyard code again. If they have respawners on the ship, they should automatically be bound to be able to use the shipyard. Check your ship weight by viewing the shipyard now. Your basic Atlas core can lift 1,000 kilograms. The more items you add to the ship, the more weight goes up. You get more Atlas core upgrades starting in Tier 2. This allows you to increase the weight the ship's Atlas core can lift. Make sure not to go over the 1,000 kilogram weight limit when starting out in T1, or your ship will not be able to lift and complain to you that the ship weighs more than the Atlas core can lift. You can gain more than 1,000 kilograms in T1 by using conductive materials such as copper, silver, and gold. To get a bonus, place these materials in the internal slot of the Atlas core when building. Now it's time for a propulsion source. You can start out by building sails if you have no other propulsion source and you've just started playing. If you were lucky enough to find an engine schematic in a chest, you must also have a power generator schematic to fuel the engine. This is often a mistake made by new players who got the Founders Pack and build their first ship with the engine only to find out that they can't fuel it. Engines cost 250 knowledge, so you will likely have to build a sail ship to start and collect more data banks on the next 1 to 2 islands before having enough to unlock the first T1 engine. When you unlock your first engine, you also automatically unlock the power generator to fuel it. Never count on finding the power generator schematic in a chest on the first island that you start on. For the basis of this tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and create both the engine and power generator just to show you how to place and fuel them. Engines cannot be placed on flat decking. They also can only be placed on the angular sides of your ship frame. Power generators, which are basically fuel tanks, can only be placed on flat parts of decking. You'll notice that on this dinghy ship design, I placed the fuel tank under the front of the ship so that I can stand on the top deck and refuel it easily. The mistake that most new players make is that they hide their power generator down in the ship somewhere. Their Atlas core is also placed somewhere that's not easy to access or it's hard to get to. In this video, you can see that I've placed both the power generator and the Atlas core in both easy to use places. Next, build a storage container or 3 to store loot on the new ship. You want to build multiple if you have resources and time. This is because you need to safely store the loot you have in your current inventory, as well as having enough space for future loot on new islands. Often I see a mistake as people build a 1 storage container, they quickly fill it up, and then they've got to go through the hassle of building another shipyard, docking, building an assembly station, building more storage containers and placing them. It just takes up a lot of time. It's always good if you've got the materials to just build 3 or 4 right at the get-go, and then you have plenty of space to store materials from the start. After you have a storage container, place all your materials in them. This will keep them safe in case you get attacked while you're building your current ship. The next important thing is understanding how players can interact with your storage on the ship. Other players cannot loot your storage without first damaging the container to 100% if the ship is docked in a shipyard. If a player damages the container while docked to 100%, the storage container despawns and leaves a loot bag. If a player is salvaging or damaging the storage while docked, you get a red warning message that your ship is taking damage in the lower left chat box. If the ship is in the air, they must damage it to 50% before they get the option to loot the container by holding and channeling with E. The container will break off the ship at 75% damage and be destroyed at 100% and leave a bag while in the air. The next bit of information I'm going to share with you is extremely important, and it's about ship damage. When your ship is docked, if any damage is done to any part of your ship, you get a red warning in the lower left chat box stating that your ship is taking damage. For example, you would get this message if someone was salvaging one of your storage containers. If a player is attacking your shipyard, you get a red warning stating that your shipyard is taking damage. This would happen if someone was shooting or salvaging your shipyard. You get no warning for damage at all if your ship is in the air. In fact, the only time you know your ship is taking damage in the air is if someone is damaging your respawner. You would get a message stating that your respawner is taking damage. So if you do not dock your ship when you visit an island, someone could completely destroy your ship without your knowledge of this happening if they make sure not to damage the respawner. They can also dive the ship into the abyss and completely destroy your ship without your knowledge. It is very important to understand this and to know where your ship is or have someone else watching it while visiting an island if you don't use a shipyard to dock it. Next, let's talk about wings. You will not need wings unless you plan to pass through a wind wall into either another T1 or a T2 zone, so keep this in mind. But for the purpose of this tutorial, we're going to go over some important information about wings now. Wings start out costing 100 knowledge to unlock in the knowledge tree. You will only need horizontal wings for wind walls, and I would suggest at least 2, one on each side of the ship, with around 10 power each. As a side note, you will want at least 40 to 45 power at the 1,000 kilogram weight to travel through the first wind wall. When building large parts on the assembly station, note how when you try to build a second wing, it says that something is blocking the area. This is the first wing, and you'll need to remove the wing off of the assembly station to go ahead and create the second one. You can place wings vertical if you want them to act as a rudder and turn your ship quickly, or place them horizontally to pitch the ship up and down quickly. If you place a wing at an angle, they split their power to both turn and pitch depending on the angle. So if you had a 10 power wing at a 45-degree angle, you split the power and they have 5 power towards wing or pitch up and pitch down, and 5 power towards rudder or turn left and turn right. This is often called a hybrid wing setup. I'm going to go ahead and remove the engine, power generator, and both wings off the ship, since it's unlikely that on the first island you would start with these anyway. Now you have everything that is needed to leave the first island. Go forth and explore the world. It's a good idea to start your own map, or at least a mental map, while traveling to different islands to collect more knowledge. You can visit the official Worlds Adrift forums and find a link to the community map as well. Let's go over how to control the ship quickly. You can hit E to access the helm, hold down the spacebar to raise the ship up, or hold down Control to lower the ship down. You can then use the left and right arrows to turn the ship to the left and right slowly. As we don't have wings on the ship acting as rudders, the ship will turn very slowly. You can also hit the up arrow and down arrow to move the power lever forward and reverse. However, because we don't have engines currently, this does nothing. Walk over to the sail and hold down E to interact with it. This will unfurl the sail and open it up. The wind will then start pushing the ship forward through the sail. We'll also want to note that because we have 2 sails, one on the left and one on the right, it's very important to open both sails at the same time. Otherwise, what would happen, because the game is a physics-based game, is the power would start pushing the sail and then our ship would slowly start turning to the left because I only had the right side sail open. So it's important to note that when you're building a ship, You put parts equally, so if you have an engine on the left side, you should also put the same weight engine on the right side, because weight makes a difference. This goes for wings, engines, sails, and pretty much every other thing that you could add to a ship. You want to make sure that you distribute the weight equally. Hopefully this video will help out new players in Worlds Adrift get a jump start on building their first ship and avoid some pitfalls along the way. Thanks for watching the shipbuilding tutorial.